we have exactly enough time starting now. And the convenient truth, which is the theme of this panel, is that we can do it in a way that is profitable and makes America stronger, richer, more prosperous, and more healthy.
But the kind of environmentalism that I do is called environmental justice, which means that no community should have to bear the brunt of a disproportionate amount of environmental burdens and not enjoy some environmental benefits.
So we need to densify our cities. It's happening. And to do that, we need to densify them in a way that is environmentally and socially just.
So these issues now need to be looked, I think, from the perspective of a global alliance. How do we capture the carbon trading funds to direct them towards some of the poorest countries?
You know, the people in companies that have made billions of dollars already off energy efficiency will tell you it's simply an act of management will and operational attention consistently applied over a long period.
We have to make the case not just for the next election, for the CEO's 4, 5, or 6-year term, but I think the people are aware that if you appeal to their better instincts and their better nature and say, look, we're going to have to go through a transition here, but look, we're going to be at the end, that you can overcome.
So, first of all, I'd like to frame that there are very different solutions for the developing world and the developed world.
Good.
I did some pro bono consulting for the International Rescue Committee and went to refugee camps in Ethiopia to look at how we might green them. And what you see is in an environment with extraordinary limited resources, the appropriate technology, the modern, actually is life enhancing. So for example, if we took a school, a single room school, and you put one light bulb that is powered by a solar panel in it, all of a sudden it could do adult education at night, etc. So there, really, the green revolution is bringing promise. It's actually expanding opportunities, actually, whereas in America, we need to conserve.
I don't get a satisfactory answer to my question before. The logic is so clear.
Yeah.
The political logic, the economic logic, the logic of bringing people out of poverty. What is standing in the way? I haven't gotten a good answer. The president talked about breaking down barriers. What is it campaign finance reform we need? What's standing in the way? Because if the logic is this clear, either the logic is wrong or something is standing in the way that we need to tackle that's very big.
Why aren't we figuring out how we pull people together and do it in a way that we know is going to actually restore the dignity of all people, including and the planet? I mean, we don't. I mean, it's politically expedient to do nasty things in poor communities. I don't care if they're here or in developing countries. And right now, you know, I come from a place where I absolutely know how expendable we're considered. And if we can't see this as an opportunity, you know, knowing that we're sending the planet down the tubes, hell in a handbasket real quick, and it's because of these kind of intolerances toward people that we do not consider as important as ourselves, that's what's going to keep us going in the same direction we're going in.
Well, and remember, so short answer, the reason you haven't got a satisfactory answer to what's in the way is there are about 60 or 80 distinct market failures, more politely I'll call them obstacles, to buying energy efficiency. We listed them 10 years ago in a publication called Climate Making Sense and Making Money. And in the facing column, it says, what's the business opportunity each one can be turned into? For example, the president talked about retrofitting buildings in New York. Well, the landlord in New York marks up the utility bill. That's one of his profit centers. You have to change that. Why should you fix up your office or your apartment if you don't own it, and why should the landlord do it if you pay the utilities? That's a split incentive. We're designing a drop-in lease rider to solve that problem. But there are 24 different parties in the commercial real estate value chain, each with stunning perfection, rewarded for wasting energy and penalized for saving it. Each of those is a showstopper. Each one is a business opportunity. Each one requires meticulous, prolonged attention to detail. Paying attention is the most important thing we've been missing. You know, the people in companies that have made billions of dollars already off energy efficiency will tell you it's simply an act of management will and operational attention consistently applied over a long period.
So an entire series of different issues of institutional design could take place if we actually took advantage of backwardness. But instead, what it comes to is, again, that there's a complex of interests that are really making very fast money from development. And the issue is not the logic of the economic logic that we are putting forth, but that economic logic confronts interests. And those interests are very entrenched. They're entrenched mentally in terms of the mental models that they adhere to. And second, the short-term gain now is taking over the medium and long term. If a CEO of the major 500 is a lifespan of 4 years now, maximum 8, how can you expect them to have the trade-offs? Similar thing is happening to the politics of these countries, because the politicians are running on re-election on the basis of redistributive issues, but not on the basis of a politics of winning.
You've been frustrated, we've all been frustrated by the lack of any real national aggressive policy to change this. What it takes, I think, are a few victories, a few tangible victories where the public can say, look, it is actually working. I think in the automobile, alternate fuel industry, we can see that in a very short period of time. And then you need a champion. And I have to give credit here to Al Gore, because you had groups like RMI and Amory and others raising this issue for a long time, but till you had a global champion stand up here and say this is important in a very high-profile level, you wouldn't have had the politicians, the public policy following behind that recognition. So I think we have to have some tangible victories, which I think will come relatively soon, I think particularly in the fuel area, in the area of alternate vehicles, and then you have to have that champion standing up for those changes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to close this panel. I want to thank, first of all, our panelists, and I think you should all thank them because it's been a terrific panel. If it is Amory, as Dana Meadows said, that we have just enough time starting now, please note we have started now. Thank you very much.
Very good. Excellent.
I think one of the things we want to explore this morning is really about making the business case for action on sustainability and on sort of restorative practices. And I think we have today 5 leaders and innovators.
So I made that speech and I challenged that tiny little group of people to lead our company, just 16 or 17 of them, to lead our company to sustainability. And the charge was, do something.
You're making the best landmines in the world, the highest quality landmines in the world. But you're making landmines. And you're going to say, well, we'll stop making landmines when the consumer of landmines tells us that they don't want it anymore. I don't believe that. I believe business should be proactive.
There is so much knowledge out there, so many people like Yvonne and Ray that have led the way. And so it's not so hard, and there are lots of opportunities. And so it's just been good business for us.
And I think what we've seen is a transformation from brands being about just trust, i.e. this is a good product, to this is good for me, good for my community, and good for my planet.
As you point out, that ordinary people who always dictate what the world is going to do are now willing to make more of the intelligent long-term choices, and they are pulling along with them, therefore, the business and political leaders to make the right decisions. And as a consequence of that, it becomes good business to do the right thing, and that's the hope of the world.
This began for us with a question from our customers in the summer of 1994, just 13 years ago, a question we'd never heard before. What's your company doing for the environment? And we really had no answers. So a task force was convened to address this question, began to get some answers, and we brought people from our company around the world to come together in this task force, and the conveners of the task force asked me to address the task force and give them my environmental vision. I didn't have an environmental vision. I didn't want to make that speech. I dragged my feet, I hemmed and hawed, they stayed on my case. Finally, I relented, agreed to speak. The date was set August 31. Come the middle of August, I have not a clue as to what to say. I cannot get beyond we obey the law, comply. But somehow I knew that comply was not a vision. And at that moment, a book landed on my desk. It was Paul Hawkins' book, The Ecology of Commerce. It was pure serendipity, and I picked it up and began to thumb it and then began to read, and very quickly it became that spear in the chest epiphanal experience. And so I made that speech, and I challenged that tiny little group of people to lead our company, just 16 or 17 of them, to lead our company to sustainability. And the charge was, do something.
When we got into this area, and it's only, as I say, been 3 years at the most, probably a little bit more maybe, that we started to focus. Lee Scott and I, Lee is our CEO, did not have a vision, Ray. We just thought, we met with my friend Peter Seligman from CI and another fellow from the World Bank, and the original focus was on our family foundation, trying to develop a little bit of an environmental, experimental focus there. But they came in and talked to us about what we might do in this area, because they did have an idea of what we could do. And we took it off and talked to some of our management group, and also engaged with outside resources, including, again, Amory and a number of other people in the NGO field, and who had all the knowledge in the world where we had none, basically. But what we did then is, and what the thing that's made it successful is that we exposed sort of senior middle management folks to this, and formed teams there to address the issues. And we, fortunately now, ignored the advice to just focus very narrowly. We focused very broadly. And remarkably, as those people began to think about these issues of sustainability top of mind, and these are all people with full-time jobs, we started to see results very, very quickly. And it's just developed across the board.
Yvonne, you went through, since the beginning, really, a similar process, I suppose, of, I think you've referred to it as leading the examined life for a business, of constantly looking at the business and understanding the impact of the business, and then finding ways to tackle, as Ray says, those 7 faces, et cetera. And I guess one of the key things I think that's very difficult in this area is how you continue to force a business and a culture in a business to lead that examined life, to continue to question the practices in the business, et cetera, sometimes leading to inconvenient conclusions. For example, with Patagonia and your move to organic cotton, which was very difficult in the early and mid-90s. Maybe if you could reflect on some of those things in terms of how you actually, now many years into running the business this way, how you continue to embed that culture in the business.
Well, it's very easy for us because we've been at this since 1970 or so. And basically every employee that I have has bought into it. And I don't have to answer to any stockholders. We consider our stockholder the planet. And so, for every job opening we have at Patagonia, we have 900 applications. And so we pick whoever can do the job, and then they have to kayak and surf and climb and do all those other things, and they have to have a background of working for the environment, whether it's, volunteering for environmental organizations. So my 1,200 employees are all bought into the whole reason why we're in business.
First of all, let me mention that at Coca-Cola, we don't have an eco dream team like Ray. We have something called the Environmental Advisory Board. We're a little bit more corporate than Interface. But Amory Lovin serves on that board along with Dan Esty and John Gummer and a host of other international environmental leaders. And I think the support we've gotten from Amory and from Rocky Mountain Institute has really helped us over the last several years become a much better company. To your question, Coca-Cola is really a brand company. I mean, we are one of the earliest brands in the marketplace, and it used to be that a brand meant quality. It was trust. You bought a brand because you knew what you were getting. And I think what we've seen is a transformation from brands being about just trust, i.e., this is a good product, to this is good for me, good for my community, and good for my planet. And that value proposition, that total value proposition, is something that we're seeing increasingly in what the consumer expects of us as a company to deliver. It's not just delivering a juice or a water or a tea or a coffee or a cola, but it's doing it in the right way, in a way that connects with consumers and with their values. And because we are in the marketplace every single day in 200 countries with our products, we need to be responsive to those demands, to those interests, to those values. And so as we approach our work on sustainability, it's very much with that perspective in mind.
The idea that we're blaming government and business and the weenies for all of that it's disingenuous. I mean, everybody in this room is reasonably successful. I suppose everybody in this room would be unwilling in your heart of hearts, if you had a vote alone and nobody could see, to reshuffle the deck of life and luck and start all over again against 6 billion people. You like stability. You like systems that give you a lot of the things that we take for granted. And you like buying stock of companies that in 90 days will do what you told them. And you like buying tube socks, 12 pairs for $1.19. Well, how do you think they got made? Where do you think? Well, I don't know. Well, but we all like to make short-term decisions that give us what we want. But more and more now, again, mostly due to technology, what's being pushed in our face are the consequences of those decisions. And those consequences are now being realized by so many ordinary people, as you point out, that ordinary people who always dictate what the world is going to do are now willing to make more of the intelligent long-term choices, and they are pulling along with them, therefore, the business and political leaders to make the right decisions. And as a consequence of that, it becomes good business to do the right thing, and that's the hope of the world. And it will happen, but not because irrational people suddenly became rational, but because what they want and what they need and what they feel are the right things to do start to intersect a path that makes sense.
Well, with that, I want to thank all of you for your great questions, and particularly if you join me in thanking the panelists for contributing like this.
What is the purpose of financial capital? And we can talk about that, because I think that really drives how we're investing in the future.
So in some ways, I think that there's a disconnect in the marketplace right now, because there are a lot of great ideas, there are a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of excellent businesses, and on the other side, there's a lot of money sitting around in foundations who are looking to put that money to work.
I think we're taking the same approach with respect to green tech. We're looking for real advances.
And I think that's an amazing thing, and that's part of what I think the topic is today, is how do you bring the tools of business to nonprofits?
We're at a time now where there has been a huge concentration of wealth, and these individuals are looking for a place to reallocate some of what they've gained toward the common good.
When you think about philanthropy, there are many different types of philanthropy. You can just give to a cause you like. You can do mission giving, which is the way our family foundation, Argosy Foundation, works. And it's also called venture philanthropy, where basically the definition is you follow the venture capital model. You have very specific goals, you have benchmarks, you use the rules for optimizing the likelihood of success. Then you have a lot of variations within that. You have loans, you have program-related investments, PRIs. So we're not just talking about one format. And if you think about social-focused business, from my point of view, even Boston Scientific was a profitable philanthropy. So you can stretch it and push it. But we had goals that were aimed on solving, in this case, health problems that we look at this way. And we'll obviously hear more of that from the panel.
Part of the reason I asked the question is I was recently at an investors meeting, and there was a man who had been with Morgan Stanley for about 25 years and had done very well in a traditional investing capacity, and had stepped out of that world and started really reflecting on this question. And I thought he had come up with a very powerful, succinct answer, which is the purpose of capital is sustaining life. And that's where he took it. So kind of segueing back to the foundation and thinking about, okay, if you're working for a foundation and you've got capital, how do you deploy it in a way that you're working towards sustaining life?
You know, one of the things that got me started on the investment side was when I was studying the philanthropic world, and this was about 7 years ago, it appeared that 3% of philanthropic dollars go into the environment. And so I said, you know what, I want to make a big difference in this environmental situation. How can I do it? And I said, if it's just 3%, and there are a lot of great organizations for the last 30 years have been trying to do it, there wasn't much that I felt personally that I could do to get that 3% to be 3.1% or 5%, whatever. And so I sort of shifted over to the capital markets and said that the solution to solving these problems is not going from 3 to 4%. It's actually trying to figure out how that 97% can be used to it. What you see happening is that if there is effective policy, you can tap into the corpus for foundations and for endowments. And if there are vehicles that they can make those investments in, then that money will flow into solving these problems. So in some ways, I think that there's a disconnect in the marketplace right now because there are a lot of great ideas, there are a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of excellent businesses, and on the other side, there's a lot of money sitting around in foundations who are looking to put that money to work. But I don't think that the financial infrastructure is in place to actually connect the entrepreneurs and those business opportunities with the capital that wants to put it to work.
We tend to invest in smart people with what appear to be good ideas. You know, Google was referred to us by Andy Bechtolsheim. They came to see him, my co-founder's son. He said, well, they thought they were going to make their money from banner ads. And I didn't think that was going to work, Andy said, but they seemed like smart guys, so I wrote them a check. You know, so obviously that one worked out very well financially for the investors. And I think we're taking the same approach, and he then graciously referred Google to us, but I think we're taking the same approach with respect to green tech. We're looking for real advances because when we look out at the world, you say there's a, you know, 500 million or 1 billion, somewhere in that range. Only at most 1/10 of the people on the planet are living a lifestyle that, say, we're used to. So if we need to cut our CO2 output by half and we want to bring them up, everyone who aspires to live a quality life, that means we're off by a factor of 20 in footprint. And Amy taught me this quote from Edwin Landis, said, innovation is the cessation of stupidity, okay? And that's, I call it innovation type 1. And we heard a lot on the previous panel about ceasing doing stupid things to be more efficient. And obviously, we should recycle plastic, okay? Well, that's that kind of innovation. But in order to write the factor of 20 on a long-term basis, we're going to need better science. And so that's the kind of thing we're investing with, a very long time horizon. They're often just science experiments, and they take 5 years to revenue, like the biotech investments do.
I started as a business person, and I didn't have an environmental connection, and I had my spear in the chest was through the works of the people that are in this room, really. And I then ended up getting a degree in environmental management. I had an MBA. And I set out in some sense to be a walking oxymoron and a corporate environmentalist. And I think that's an amazing thing, and that's part of what I think the topic is today, is how do you bring the tools of business to nonprofits and the thinking of nonprofits to public good, stakeholder involvement, the common good, bring those to business.
And it's fascinating because I'm a businessman, and I spent my whole career trying to grow things. And obviously, I grew things so that I could make money and my shareholders could make money. As a board member, I was a member of a small group they called the Strategic Growth Committee to help the team deal with the expansion. And I just completely fell in love with the mission and the projects and the team. And the board decided to recruit a CEO, and I raised my hand, and here I am. But it's a different challenge. But I'm finding that the questions are just as good, maybe better. And that foundations and individuals, we're at a time now where there has been a huge concentration of wealth. And these individuals are looking for a place to reallocate some of what they've gained toward the common good. And it's interesting to see people do that because they go through a transformation where this becomes their passion. And our job at RMI is basically to be worthy of that and to be scalable enough so that we can increase our impact. So that's an interesting challenge as well. And the last thing, which is an interesting contrast, is that I'm used to really looking at engagements and analyzing them. Usually, how profitable are they going to be, is my background. Now, we need to meet a baseline of sustainability for any project that's either funded by philanthropy or by a company that we're partnering with. But we're really looking for the most impact.
And once again, thank you, the panel. Thank you. Great audience. Good questions.
We're going to talk about serious and perhaps a slightly unpleasant subject this afternoon of fear and security. But I have a wonderful panel.
That is, how can we be safe and feel safe in ways that work better and cost less than present arrangements?
Is before we start communicating, what happens if we just listen to what our target audience is trying to say? And that turned out to be an extraordinarily valuable effort.
And he said, I've discovered something really odd. Security doesn't come from the number of tanks I deploy. Security, the key driver of security and prosperity in Afghanistan, are credible institutions.
Thank you very much for being here with us this afternoon. I'm Christine Lowe. I come from Hong Kong in China. My association with RMI goes back to 1992. I was in public office then, and I remember I read somewhere that there was somebody called Lovins who wrote about this new idea called negawatts. And because I took an interest in energy issues, I decided to ask my legislative aide to look for this Mr. Lovins. Well, in those days, we didn't have emails, and I couldn't Google him. So I found a fax number to an organization called the Rocky Mountain Institute. So I faxed him, and I said, "Dear Mr. Lovins," and I wrote a very nice letter saying I need some help in looking at some aspects of how we deal with utility regulation in Hong Kong. Well, the next day, I think I got 45 pages from the fax machine. And I thought, wow, this is really amazing. I got the man. And since then, Amory's come out to Hong Kong numerous times. He has a lot of he has a fan club in Hong Kong. We haven't yet been able to do anything really big in China, but hopefully in the next 5 or 10 years, we'll be able to do something really big because obviously the time for Amory and for RMI has come.
I'd like to introduce the concept of security that means freedom from fear of privation or attack. That is, how can we be safe and feel safe in ways that work better and cost less than present arrangements? And how can this condition be built from the bottom up, not from the top down, in ways that are the province of every citizen, not the monopoly of national governments, that don't rely on the threat or use of violence, that make others more secure, not less, whether on the scale of the village or the globe, and that also save enough money to pay for other needs and help to advance other overarching goals?
Andrew said he felt a little oxymoronish being a corporate environmentalist. He should try being a spy environmentalist. Unfortunately, there are two big types of threats that we have to look at in the midst of moving in these economically sound and democratic directions. I call them malignant and malevolent. Global warming is a malignant threat, and let me just skip to say where I think both being resilient against malevolent threats, resilient against malignant threats, and promoting of trust at a local level come together. I think they come together in two places. One is getting off oil. We need to do to oil what electrification and refrigeration did to salt at the end of the 19th century. Salt was a strategic commodity. It mattered whether your country had salt mines. People fought wars over salt. Electricity and refrigeration came along, and salt was effectively destroyed as a strategic commodity. Now, we still import salt. We're salt independent, right? Nobody cares where the salt comes from. It's just a commodity. But nobody dominates his neighbors because he has salt mines anymore. Oil is different. Oil is the strategic commodity of the age. Power is wielded in the hands of those countries, most of them dictatorships or autocratic kingdoms that control oil. And we need to break that monopoly, oligopoly. We need to break that control.
I spent a lot of time in places like Afghanistan and have come to a very similar point to Amory's, a central proposition that stability in the most fragile parts of the world will come when citizens are embedded in relationships of trust with their governments and with the market. And I really came upon this when I was working with General Hillier, who was the Canadian commander of the 5th deployment of ISAF, the international forces in Afghanistan. And a light bulb went off for him. He had his strategic planners map the causes of insecurity in Afghanistan. And he said, you know, I've discovered something really odd. Security doesn't come from the number of tanks I deploy. Security, the key driver of security and prosperity in Afghanistan, are credible institutions.
With regard to Claire's point, I think there is one pretty good example of where some of the stabilization and reconstruction has worked, and that's in the southern Philippines. And the model there is instructive because the U.S. basically went in, as I understand it, in small units working very closely with the Philippine, not just armed forces, but Philippine government. And part of the approach to the local datus, local leaders, was what would it take for you to be neutral in this fight? You don't need to love us, but what would it take for you to be neutral? This bridge, this well, this road. And then the approach went to delivering sort of the goods, services, and money to the local Philippine NGOs, to the local Philippine government authorities. So at the end of that time, you didn't have a big American flag flying over the well. You had people's confidence and trust in their government enhanced. And that sort of leads to this point about not having us engage in the first place.
I am not policy and strategy. I'm one of those who implements. And if you'll allow me to start with a personal anecdote, I took a little vacation a few weeks ago, and I returned to my hospital, where I'm the chairman of the Department of Medicine. I had turned it over capably, came back to find an email telling me that even though I had returned from Afghanistan in March, I was to leave August 27th for 458 days in Afghanistan. That's where we've gone in rotation cycles. That's what the cost is to those who are actually serving. Keep that in mind for a moment. When the Oh, and by the way, I should preface this. I am an active duty Navy officer. I'm in uniform every day. I do not speak here today for the Department of the Navy or the Department of Defense, and they would be the first ones to tell you that. Okay? That was my first time in Singapore. Many of you in the room will probably be familiar with that island. I found that when you are very small and very wealthy and surrounded by people who do not like you, and you're responsible for something on the order of 1/3 of the world's banking and something on the order of 1/3 of the world's shipping, you are an attractive nuisance to your neighbors. And so you learn diplomacy, and you learn placement, and you learn Aikido. Right? Right? You learn how to flow with the forces around you. On the list of lessons I took away from a very rich few days on that island, with some very, very smart people, that was high on the list of lessons. That to work with the forces surrounding you is much better than imposing the force you can bring to bear.
There's a chapter I've contributed to a book on global warming and national security. It's out on the piano, and one aspect of it is a joint energy planning exercise between a tree hugger and a hawk. And the tree hugger is the ghost of John Muir, and the hawk is the ghost of George S. Patton. What is interesting about that dialogue is that Patton and Muir don't share one another's objectives. Muir's worried about carbon, Patton's worried about terrorists. But it turns out they slowly discover in the course of talking to one another that what they want to do is pretty much the same thing. Get away from oil, get onto distributed generation of electricity, etc. Well, we have in this country, and I think internationally, a lot of groups that have their own perfectly legitimate interests. One of the mistakes we have made in this whole area is to try to convince everybody who's connected with it that our motives are the right one, and if we just insist on them more intently and more loudly, we'll prevail. And that's completely the wrong approach. All right? It's Patton and Muir, believe me, they can work it out.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience and your time. Please thank the panel for their wonderful contribution.
I'm Molly.
I'm Tom, and we'd like to welcome everybody to Peace Ranch.
Good evening. My name is Adam Albright, and I've been on the board of directors for a number of years. I've seen this place grow from a relatively small outfit up a canyon over here to a place that can put on an event like this and do all the great things you've seen today. So I just want to congratulate everyone here, and I have an invitation for you all. This is Jesse Fink, who many of you saw today in one of the seminars, and Jesse and I have a proposition for you. I'm going to let Jesse tell you what it is.
So our challenge for you tonight is, do you want?
No, you go
okay.
ahead, no.
Our challenge tonight is that we would love to inspire anyone who is not a member of the National Solutions Council to join. There is a card that's in the bag that you'll be getting, and anyone who joins as a result of tonight, Adam and I will match that, and so it'll be double of whatever is granted from tonight. So. That's it? Well, thank you.
Thank you all for being here, not only this evening, but for the last day and last evening. It's been an incredible event. We are so delighted of all the supporters for many years, many of you in the room and many others throughout the country and world. We could not be where we are today for this 25th anniversary without you, having contributed in many different ways. In life, it is really important that we really honor and mark our milestones. So this is certainly a serious, momentous milestone for RMI. Thank you for being part of it. I'd also like to thank all the staff who have helped make this event possible and many of the in-kind people. It's been a tremendous effort. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for everything that you do. I'd also like to recognize, I mean, at RMI, we really work on our convening capability, our ability to get smart people together. But we had no idea that we could attract, for an event like this, a group of panelists of the caliber that we did. And lastly, he's been introduced before, but I think we should recognize him as a group. At RMI, the ideal is thought leadership. Our guiding principle is thought leadership. And sometimes we have the chance to align ourselves with people that set the standard for thought leadership. There's one man who has been essential to this event and who has really put his mark on it and helped us at RMI. He's a 3-time Pulitzer Prize winner. He's one of the greatest thought leaders in our nation, Tom Friedman.
Amory has been a real inspiration and thought leader for me, but for many, many people in this country. And to the extent that green is now on Main Street, the RMI really, I think, can take a lot of credit. One of my themes is that if you look at where we've come in just the last 5 years, in terms of green, it's a revolution. It is a revolution. If you look at where we need to go from where we are now in the next 10 years, we're still just having a party. We have a long, long way to go. And that's why it is so important that you all have turned out tonight to support RMI, because we're going to need RMI to get us where we need to go if we're going to have a real green revolution. So I will leave you with those words that I began this conference with about 36 hours ago. That line that Amory wrote from Dana Meadows' eulogy, what she used to say when asked, "Do we have enough time?" Yes, we have enough time, just enough time, starting now. Thank you very much.
Most of today's problems are like that. We cause them ourselves. But at RMI, we harness hidden connections, so the cause of solutions is solutions. So we solve, or better still, avoid a problem in a way that also solves or avoids many other problems without making new ones. So join me for a few minutes in envisioning where these linked, multiplying solutions can lead if we take responsibility for creating the world we want. Imagine a world where the successful industries, rather than wasting 99.98% of their materials, follow Ray Anderson's lead. They take nothing, they waste nothing, they do no harm. Where the cost of waste is driving unnatural capitalism extinct. Where integrative engineering and biomimicry, innovation inspired by nature, create abundance by design. And where elegant frugality turns scarcities and conflicts in energy, water, land, and minerals into enough for all, forever. Where energy policy is no longer a gloomy multiple choice test. Do you prefer to die from A, climate change, B, oil wars, or C, nuclear holocaust? We choose D, none of the above. Imagine a world where we don't just know more, we also know better. where overspecialization and reductionism have gone from vitally fashionable to unaffordably foolish. Imagine then a world where reason, diversity, tolerance, and democracy are once more ascendant, where economic and religious fundamentalism are obsolete, where tyranny is odious, rare, failing, and dwindling, and where global consciousness has transcended fear to live and strive in hope. This is the astonishing world we are all gradually creating together. In their many ways, they're mobilizing society's most potent forces, businesses in mindful markets, and citizens in vibrant civil society, all co-evolving, to do what is necessary at this pivotal moment, the most important moment since we walked out of Africa. The moment when humanity has exactly enough time starting now. Running through this emerging tapestry is a bright thread, a small group of unusual people who, with humor and fearlessness, chutzpah and humility, eager enthusiasm, and relentless patience, are composing their lives and combining their efforts to make it so. Here we are. And now imagine the power of all of us together to make it so. Thank you.
So at the 50th anniversary, I'll be 79, you'll be 85. When they wheel us out here for the stage.
When we bound out on the stage, invigorated by all the colleagues who wind up our key every morning.
What RMI will you be describing in 25 years? What will RMI look like in 25 years, and what will be its biggest challenges?
I think one of the big lessons we'll be able to look back on is that public policy played catch-up, and that we should be grateful for all those who labored in Washington and other capitals trying to change the rules. But really what mattered most was that business in coevolution with civil society came up with innovative competitive strategies, technologies, and design integration that were much more powerful than public policy. They enabled the business logic to play itself out, and then outfits like RMI came along with institutional acupuncture, figuring out where the business logic was congested and not flowing properly, sticking needles in it, getting it flowing, and with astonishing speed, the market system actually started to work properly.
So I have a problem that has to do, I'm working kind of the last chapter of my book already, and it's how to balance fear and hope around this issue. You touched on it at the end of your talk. I find, when you talk to people and you say, look, you just don't understand the scale of this problem. No one's really talking about the scale of the problem. The attitude is, if it's that big, what the hell, let's party, okay? I can't possibly solve it. But if you say, well, let's not talk about the scale, let's march forward, it's not that urgent. People say, well, if it's not that urgent, let's party. How do I balance this out?
You quoted Dana Meadows as always seeing the glass as half full. Well, I don't see it as half full or half empty. Having kind of an engineering mentality, I see it as having 100% design margin expandable by efficiency. And my old mentor, Dave Brower, said that optimism and pessimism are different sides of the same irresponsible, simplistic surrender to fatalism. treating the future as fate, not choice, and not taking responsibility for creating the world we want. David Orr, our trustee from Oberlin College, had a wonderful remark a few days ago to the effect that optimism has its feet up on the table and a satisfied smirk knowing the deck is stacked. Hope has its sleeves rolled up and is working hard to change the odds. So I think all of our work aligns very clearly with hope.
So thank you for what you do. Thank you all for joining us here tonight, and I look forward to 25 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.